Good afternoon. How's everybody? I see smiling faces. Have y'all had Easter break yet, or is it coming up? It's coming up. So no wonder y'all are smiling.
It's coming up.
It's coming up. Oh boy.
My
Well,
last day is tomorrow.
oh gosh, y'all gonna have get finished with me tonight, and then your break starts tomorrow, and you don't have to come to class next week. Y'all won't know what to do.
And
Everyone's
I'm and
fatigued
I'm done with the
already.
skip. And I'm done with my skip, so I can enjoy my break.
Boy, howdy.
I'm on
Well,
my
I'm going to
break.
assign you some more work tonight, so don't get too comfortable here. We're going to have to jump on the cap here
And
before
and
long.
I'm gonna get started on it.
So that's a good starting point tonight. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you being with us. Let's talk about where we are and where we're going, as we always do. So let's look at our weekly schedule and see what's coming up here. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. All right. So looking at our weekly schedule. So this week we're going to talk about managing facilities. You had your facilities walkthrough due this week. We're going to talk about accounting and budgeting next week. Again, you get the week off. When we come back, your case study 4, your final case study will be due. Now, remember, that's a bear. There's a lot of moving pieces with all that EC and instruction and instructional supervision and maybe having some parent meetings like from the skip. I mean, pretty much it's scheduling, knowing what your remember when we did that audit in the OMA about what do we offer and how's and what they're supposed to get. I mean, everything we've done this semester kind of culminates in this final in this final case study. So I know that y'all are going to do a great job. So that's enough about that. And then when we get that week, Dr. Sane will do financial management principles and some other things. And then our last session, we're just going to do some odds and ends and maybe look at a case study. And we'll talk most specifically about the cap at that point. So I do want to introduce the cap tonight in our shell. Let me go to this one here. In our shell, I've got one right here that says cap materials. And so you can see I've got the tasks and the prompts. Again, there's no template. You just create your own like you always do. I've got a couple of South Carolina examples, and I got a couple of North Carolina examples. And so let me switch over to that right quick, and we'll look at task 1. So what you're doing in the CAP is you're looking at 5 specific areas of your teacher working condition surveys. That's it. Don't make it bigger than it is. We're just looking at these 5 areas. Now, as you know, South Carolina has the same survey as North Carolina. They just call it something different. Now, here are the 5 areas. Empowerment, which is teacher leadership. Leadership, which is school leadership. I mean, if you know, facilities, resources, and time. If you want to add more than that, that's okay. You know, there's 12 different areas. And you can add like managing student conduct or whatever. But here's the rule. Here's where everybody swerves off the road and hits the tree. You can add as many as you want, but you can never not do these 5. Okay, everybody understands that. You got to do these 5, period. All the way through every task of the CAP, 4 tasks, you're going to do all the way through. You're going to look at these 5 areas. You don't just look at them in task 1 and then jump off on something else in task 2. Nope, we carry these 5 all the way through. And what we're looking for when we look at those, we're looking for the lowest items. And then we're going to resurvey those back out. You say, well, what's this needs assessment in prompt 2? Remember, there's 2 prompts. There's prompt 1, prompt 2 of task 1. First one is we're going to list. All right, here's the data from our teacher working conditions survey in these 5 areas. That's all you got to do in task 1 and prompt 1. And prompt 2, you do a needs. You simply do a copy and paste and survey those back out to your staff. And that's just good practice when you're doing quantitative work, survey methodology. You've got this data that state went and got it. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that those are still issues in your school. Times change, principles change. Might have been a while since the survey was done. Might have been, coming out of COVID, people might have been mad. We really want to determine, are those things really still a problem in our building? Now, I would pick one or two items that I would focus on from each of these. I wouldn't survey all of them. So I'm going to walk you in. Simply go to Google, NC Survey 2022. Go to the results. We'll go here. That's going to get me. Yep. View survey results. I'm going to pick a school and a district at random here. So let's see. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to pick Anson County Schools. I'll just pick them up. I know we don't have anybody. Let's see. Okay, so here are the questions that we would have under time. Let me go back. And we're going to look at Lylesville. A friend of mine used to be an individual. He used to be principal at Lylesville. All right, so here's time. Class sizes are reasonable. That's under time. School, disagree. Boy, that's a pretty big one. Let's go back one. I don't like that view as good as I like. Which view do I like? Do I like this view? No, let me go back. This is the one I like right here because it color codes it for me. So from time, which one would I pick? Looking at school, which one of these items, there's items A through G, which one of these would I pick to resurvey to the faculty from time? Just be one on this one. Which one is it and why would I pick it?
It would be A.
Yeah, exactly right, Derek, because it's the only one not in green. So that's obviously an issue, isn't it? Only 59% agree that class sizes are reasonable. So that would be my item from time. Facilities and resources. Now, facilities and resources are together. So you can see that the first few questions are resources like instructional materials, resources, computers, and then the facilities are down here at the bottom. So looking at that, there's nothing that jumps off the page. I'd probably do the first two right here because they're in the 80s. And then of the ones down toward the bottom, I would probably do this one right here. Even though it's 95, we'll see if we can do it a little bit better. We can't jump over to something else. We got to have one from facilities and one from resources. Now, you can do community support and involvement if you want to, not required. Managing student conduct, not required. Teacher leadership, this is empowerment. All those look pretty good, but I'd pick the lowest one, which would be 90. That'd be the only one I'd pick. And then on school leadership, I would pick the one that's 86. There's 3 of them that are 86. I'd pick them. I might do 3 on that one. And I would survey these same questions right here, just copy and paste right here. And that would be on your survey. And that's all that's it, folks. You present your data from these 5 areas, and you might want to talk about it a little bit, what you see in these 5 areas. And then in prompt 2, you simply go out and you resurvey them and you get your data back from your teachers. Now you're beginning to see why we need to get this done before we get too deep into May, because teachers are going to be exams and all those things. And then when we go to, let me move this out of the way. When we go to task 2, this is why it's really important. When we go to task 2, so at the end of task 1, we're going to write a set of recommendations right here. What's low and what we could possibly do to fix it. Now, in task 2, what we do is we're going to do some qualitative work. What is qualitative? Qualitative is interviews, observations, and documents. We're going to go out and we're going to ask people. Here's the recommendations. Here's the things that we identified are the lowest in these areas. Here's some recommendations that I have or my team has. You can do it individually or you can do it as a team. What do you think about these? Do you think this would work? And they're going to, and then you just capture their responses, and that's going to be your qualitative data. And so that's as far as I'm going to talk about tonight. If you can get that done until we get back after the break, that would be great. Because it takes a little time to do that survey, takes a little bit of time to do those. We're just biting it off a little bit at a time here. But the main thing here is you show your data, task 1, prompt 1. You find those lowest items at your school in those 5 areas. You resurvey. Don't do more than 10 items in total. So if you've got 1 from a couple, you can do 2. Don't do more than 3 from any area. I don't care how bad the data is. No more than 10 items. You send the survey out to your faculty. You know, these things were the lowest items on the TWC. Is that still the case here? When you get that data back, you display that data, and then you make a set of recommendations based on what that data tells you. And then with that set of recommendations in task 2, you go out and you ask people, you know, here's the problem. Here's some ideas that I have or my team has. What do you think about these? What would you suggest we do to fix these things? The classic example is I don't have enough planning time. Well, when you go talk to people, what they'll say is putting more in the schedule won't help me. There's plenty in the schedule now. I never get to have it because I'm always covering classes. That sound familiar? And so the fix is not to add more planning time in the schedule that you're not going to get to take anyway. The fix is hiring substitutes if you can find them or developing substitutes. That's one of the things that Dr. Singh talked about. Is that relationship with you. Remember when he talked about that relationship with your substitutes and making sure that you feed them and give them clothing and you treat them like the rest of your faculty? You remember when he talked about that last week? That was very, very, very insightful and very helpful, because without subs, your teachers don't get their planning time. So the issue with that planning time is not that there's not enough built into the schedule. The problem is because teachers are covering class, they never get to take it. So the fix is not putting more in the schedule. That won't fix anything. That's like, if you're making nothing, I'll double your salary. Well, you're still making nothing. If I give you 2 hours of planning every day, but if you're covering classes and you can't take it, what have I done to help you? So that's what we're talking about, is we're trying to find some fixes, how to make the culture better, get those survey scores up. What can we do to make things better? So we're going to go talk to people. That's what qualitative is. Now, you survey your needs assessment. That's those items, you survey them back out, collect that data, make your recommendations. You cannot survey in task 2. You got to go talk to people. It says clearly qualitative. Qualitative is interviews, observations, or reviewing documents. And so in this case, interviews are what are most important. Doesn't have to be formal interviews. You can just, while you're standing around in the lounge, the lunchroom, or on bus duty or whatever, have informal conversations with people. That's qualitative work. Okay, so that's the cap. And then the other 2 tasks, we'll talk about those later. They're not hard either. And so in the end, we're going to create a plan like we do every time. We're going to create a plan of different things that we're going to do in those 5 specific areas. And we're going to say, for teacher empowerment, this is the specific activity we're going to do and who's responsible. We're going to make our standard, graphic organizer plan at the end. That's where we're headed. Not, you ought to have figured out the pattern by now. We collect our data, analyze it, talk to people, and then we make a plan. We always try to get buy-in from our faculty. Just like when we've talked about, when Dr. Singh talked about the local budget. You know, you get a whole lot more support if the school improvement team and through the school improvement plan decides what budget priorities are. Then you doing it yourself, then everybody's mad at you. You get a whole lot more buy-in if everybody joins together and thinks they have a voice in things. That communication piece, that buy-in piece, that shared governance piece. That's what we're talking about. In no place that we talk about in any of the 6 evidence is it more important in the culture of the school to try to get buy-in than here. Because that's what that's what the teacher working condition survey and the CAP is all about. It's about trying to improve the culture and the relationships, communication in your building. That's the whole point of the CAP, is to try to raise those TWC scores. Dr. Singh, tell us some of the tricks that you used to raise those TWC scores.
Food.
Absolutely.
So, I always, the TWC is always given at a tricky time, usually, where people aren't really happy. So I would always actually do this. What you guys are doing is I would always find our weaknesses, or our sit team would find our weaknesses, and then we would constantly survey the staff, because we didn't want to wait a year to see if we were actually improving or not. But one of the biggest things that helped our TWC scores the most is just communication. I let my staff know everything that I could, the good, the bad, the ugly, and that always seemed to improve it. And food.
Yeah, exactly. Asking their opinion, talking, communicating, having a rationale for the things that you do. They don't always like what you did, but at least they know why you did it. You have a rationale that really helps. We're trying to get buy-in from our faculties, and that's the whole notion of the CAP, is how do we go about getting buy-in from our faculties to support the initiatives and improve the culture of our building, where people aren't mad and snapping at one another every day, that it's a pretty decent place to work. We're just trying to improve working conditions here.
I have a question about communication. I have a school where I have a teacher who has a student who has on video on the bus inappropriately touched a female student, and then he has been saying inappropriate sexual things to a female student. This is middle school, and they've reported it to the teacher, but he, as of the last 2 weeks, so they have reported 4 things that he's done to 2 different female students, and he continues to be in class. And my teacher asked me this week, like, do we have a right to know what is happening? Is because the administration, when they said, what's going on, we don't think this student should be in this class with this other student. And what they told that my teacher today was, we'll make it so he is not in your class tomorrow. And so I'm curious, like, what that privacy between what's going on the administrative level and teacher level. I guess I'm just confused about what might be happening behind the scenes, that they can't tell the teachers what's happening.
If it's a Title IX issue, it gets really, really tricky. If there's a Title IX investigation going on, typically that investigation has to be conducted before anything can be told. So yeah, it does get, but typically a principal or administrator would tell you that it is under an investigation, and there are, it's pending investigation. Dr. Lamb, I probably chimed in too soon.
No, I wanted you to. That's more of a generally speaking, principals won't say anything nowadays. They're so afraid that they'll do something wrong. They won't even tell teachers that an investigation is occurring, because in many ways that is a breach of confidentiality, that even an investigation is happening. Title IX, continues to shift and change, and I'm not sure that I know as much as I ought to know about Title IX, and I'm supposed to know all about it. But if it were me, just to be safe, I wouldn't say anything. I don't like that. I'm a full disclosure kind of person, but you know, the example that Dr. Sane used, where one teacher overheard another teacher and went and told the parent.
Mhm.
What if you told that teacher in confidence that an investigation was going on, and some other teacher came by and said, "What's happening?" And she said, "Well, you know, his investigation's and then next thing you know, you got a lawsuit over, you know, a FERPA issue or confidentiality issue. You know, everybody doesn't play fair.
Mhm.
Now, you know, I've told you a number of times, you got to understand in the adult world, there is no such thing as fair. That's a place where you go in the fall of the year to get a corn dog and ride the Ferris wheel. You got to understand that. And that everybody on your faculty does not play by the rules and doesn't understand that we're one big happy family. They have friends, and you know they want to interject themselves in things. And you know, if I was advising in this case, that principal, don't say not one word, not one piece.
Okay.
That
Is it
way,
okay
you're
to-
sure that nothing's going to blow back on you.
Is it okay to say I'm not at liberty to say?
I wouldn't say anything.
So when the teacher comes up and says, "What are you going to do about this? This is still going on."
But then that's when I remind them, you gave this to me.
You gave this to me. Okay. All
Yep.
right.
You
All right.
gave this to me. It's my responsibility to deal with it, and I will.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You know, and that's one of the things that I would advise you, and you know, you can have a better demeanor about it. Remember, I'm old and grumbling, but that's one of the things that you need to talk to teachers about on a fairly regular basis is you know, we want you to, you know, we're not telling you in any way not to bring kids to the office on referrals or not to write referrals. But what I need for you to remember is once you turn it over to us, it's us now. You're no longer a part of it unless, you know, a witness statement. But other than that, because of all the issues around confidentiality now, we can't share a lot of this stuff with you. I hate that, but that's what we've come to. You don't know who to trust or not trust, and so, you know, rather than picking and choosing who you think you can trust, you know, the best advice I can give is don't trust anybody. You know, unless you talk and you sleep. If you keep it to yourself, nobody else will ever know. That's hard for me, but
Thank you.
but that's a great question. That's a great question. I hate that that we've degenerated to that point, but we have. That we have. And so a lot of folks are looking to be offended nowadays. And or so we have to kind of guard ourselves. When my old position coach used to say in college, boys, you better gird your loins. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be tough. So and that's what you have to do. You have to steel yourself against that. You want to be able to talk to your faculty more on an individual basis and more, you know, be more humanitarian about this, but you just can't afford to. Just can't. I don't like that. I don't like that it's become a us against them, but you know, modern times call for modern administration, unfortunately. That's that. That's a great question. But again, to your point, that communication piece and talking with people and it, on the things that you can builds trust on the things that you can't. And Kim she was smarter than me. She got there before I did, but that's where I was headed with that as well. Thank you, Kim, for getting us there. That's the whole notion here. You know, how I do some things is how I'll do all things. You've got to have confidence in me. You know, you got to have confidence in me that the things that you know that I've done ethically, the things, if I could tell you, I would. But you've got to build that trust among your faculty, the things that they know and can see you do and the way that you operate every day and that you're consistent. They've got to develop that belief that you're doing the right thing because they know when things that they can know, they see you do the right thing. And that's what you're doing, is building. And in the end, the culture of the school is about building a culture of trust. I can't share this with you, but you just got to believe that I will do the right thing. And I can't just tell you to believe me. I've got to show you through the way that I treat you and the way that I do things every day. That goes back to that servant leadership part. That you've got to be a true servant leader and do the right thing. And that, I'm always here to do the right thing for kids. That we're going to all be champions for them. And that we're not in an adversarial relationship. We're all trying to do the right thing for them. Evelyn said that they had an investigation at her school. What, they didn't tell anybody until it was over. Well, that's the way it goes. Evelyn's exactly right. They can't say on one like that. They can't say a peep to anybody. But trust me, it has to be that way nowadays. I hate that, but it just has to be. It's a great question. All right, so we've talked about, yeah, a lot of teachers do think they have the right to know everything. But see, but what if they knew what you knew, they'd know what a burden it is. Yeah, they just want to be able to gossip. But if you got to do something about it, it's a burden, folks. One of the rules I've been married for nearly 40 years to the same woman, believe it or not. And one of the rules that we've had all this time is when I'm home, which not too often, she don't let me come home, but yeah, worst room school's teacher. My wife only lets me come home about 3 or 4 nights a week. I have to stay away the rest of the time so she can abide me. But we don't, never after dark do we talk about work, ever. Never. 40 years, never after dark. Her job, my job, never after dark. You've lived it all day. You can't live it all night too. It's too hard on you. You just can't. You just can't. And so these people that think they need to know everything, trust me, you're doing them a favor. Because if you knew it all, it's hard to sleep at night. It really is if you know everything. And you've got to find colleagues. I think Dr. Saines mentioned this. I know he has in previous times. You need colleagues and mentors and people in the business at your level that are principals that you can talk with and maybe find some common ground or have somebody to share this kind of stuff with. You don't need to share it with your spouse. You don't need to share it with teachers. Do not. Neither of those will go well. I had a fellow that was hired for a data project. He was an SQL developer, and they're weird dudes anyway. And this was a long time ago, and I was getting ready to retire from the school system. And I said, "Now, fellas, I'm not going to be over here tonight to supervise you." I was supervising him. I said, "I got to take my wife out to dinner on my 25th wedding anniversary." So that's been a while back. And he said, "Well, I've been married 17 years. And I said, "Is that not a recent wedding photo of you sitting right there on your desk?" And he said, "Yeah, that's my 5th wife." I said, "I've been married 17 years to 5 different women." I said, "You don't get to count it that way. And don't be telling me how crazy they are. You are the common denominator in this." But he's a good fellow, but he lived such a lifestyle that people just could not live with him. And you run that risk, turn serious here. If you bring all this stuff home and share it with your spouse, oh my Lord, you run the risk of being on number 5 by the time you're 40. So I'm just telling you now, it's hard. Same issues being a pastor. That's exactly right. You got everybody in the community's troubles. And boy, I tell you what, makes it hard to sleep at night. But you can't put it on your spouse. And you can't, teachers won't believe this, but you're protecting them more than keeping them in the dark. You really are. And they've got to believe that about you. That it's for their own good that you don't let them in on everything you know. And definitely don't do that with your spouse, because they didn't sign on for that. My wife used to say, this ain't the Baptist church where you hired a preacher and gets a song leader, like in the old days when pastor's wife always led the choir. And it's the way it works. She had her own job, she had her own life, and I made sure that our time together was our time, and it wasn't about all the troubles that I on my mind from the job every day. And that's how you can be a principal. I was for 17 years before I went to the central office for another 15 or whatever it was. That's how I survived it. That's how my wife and I survived it. These are and how you will survive and how you will thrive with your faculty is, the same way. Is you don't put all this on them, and they've got to know that, and you got to share that with them. All right, so we talked about the CAP. Okay, let's talk about competency folio. So let me share my screen. Over the break would be a good time to begin to look at your competency folio. So if you will remember, I can go ahead and close that. In our shell, there's a menu item that says MSA handbooks and competency folio resources. And I've got two specific things underneath here. Competency folio artifacts from the 6 evidences that list the artifacts that you generated by doing the 6 evidences, and open-ended, as you do open-ended activities in your clinical hours, which artifacts that would generate for which competencies. And so let's look at those 2 documents right quick. The open-ended. So when you're doing these activities for your clinical, if you address a small or large group of adults and you have an agenda, you have minutes, you have a thing, a picture of you up in front of that group. I love pictures. That would be an artifact for dialogue, inquiry, or communication. If you participate in a teacher applicant interview session, that would be an artifact, and all you got to do is have the minutes or an agenda or something to announce that you were on that committee. That would be under judgment. So you can see how that goes. So these are your open-ended ones. Now, from the SCIP and the OMA, I'll go ahead and close that one. So here are the things that you have dealt with during the OMA. Your SACS report, school report card, school improvement plan, teacher working condition survey, anything that you did that generated something that you made from these, or a picture of you doing something like having a meeting, or an agenda or minutes or any of those kinds of things from any of these things, that would be an artifact. And I've got it over here, which competency it is. And I've got them listed, numbered 1 through 21. So for example, number 1 is communication. Number 2 is conflict management. And then here are the ones from the SCIP. So it's time to go back and start looking for those artifacts and put them in your competency folio. So let's look at that right quick. So again, taskstream.com, sign into your TaskStream account. Please remember, do not go into your DRF portfolio. Enter under folios and web pages up at the top left. Find your competency folio. And there they are. And so I'm trying to remember, maybe down right about here, Aptel caps. There we go. SCIP. You can put one under judgment for SCIP, and you can look and see what might be under that. Remember, the SCIP judgment was if you were on a interview committee. There you go. If you've got something where you were on an interview committee, it would go right there. Responsiveness, there's one for either during the OMA or SCIP responsiveness. If you got something from either of those, there you go. Put your artifacts right there. And remember, you can write a little blurb if you want to. You don't have to. You can just put the artifacts in there, the actual artifacts. Now, reminding us what an artifact is. Artifact's a thing. Picture, agenda, a phone, which is a PNG, a screen, which is a JPEG, a screenshot's a PNG. So remembering that we have different kind of media, let's remember the rules on uploading documents now. If you've got a PDF form, a JPEG, a picture, or you've got a screenshot, which, you know, is the .png. Those are all images. So you use the text and image button to upload them. If you've got a Prezi, a PowerPoint, or Google Slides, those are slideshows. Use the slideshow button. If you've got a YouTube video or an MP4 video, use the video button. If you've got a YouTube link, use the link button. If you've got a Word document or a Excel document, use the attachment button. So the 4 buttons that you will use are text and image, slideshow, attachments, videos, and then the 5th one, of course, would be links if you want to put links. So those would be the 5 that you would use. Now, again, if you have a link to a YouTube video, use the link. If you have the raw MP4 video, use the link button. Use the video button here. And you can start putting those artifacts. And again, I've got a map for you where you will find them from the work that you've done. So you can start working on your competency folio. Don't spend a lot of time. Just get them in there right now. Just upload them. In 605, you're going to have time in 605, hopefully, to sit down and, you know, try to make it look nice and do whatever. But just get them in there right now. And if you want during a break or rainy Saturday afternoon, if you want to go in and do a little graphic, you know, design and make yours look nice and neat and all that. But the main thing is just get them in there, get them warehoused in there so you'll have them later on down the road. You know, as crazy as it sounds, it's a whirlwind this year that you're with us, but you get to the summer and you can't find your stuff. It gets awfully nerve-wracking. But if you've just put them in there, you can go back and add stuff to them. Just get your artifacts in there this semester. That's all I'm really concerned about, is don't come to the summer and start looking. Now don't be like Henry now. So in high school chemistry, there was a fella at the next station over in the lab. His name was Henry McGinnis. And Henry was from the thriving metropolis of Sandy Mush, North Carolina. And Henry was the 11th, I believe he was child number 11. But all of his brothers were a good bit older than him. He was an accident late in life. And the gene pool was shallow by the time Henry came along, unfortunately. And so Henry turned his gas on to his Bunsen burner one day and then started looking for his striker. He turned the gas on before he even thought about looking for the striker. And so he got, he started getting a little bit, hectic. It got to the end here and he hadn't planned and prepared and he's, getting frantic. And so finally, as I stepped back, I said, "Here, use mine." He burnt the biggest hole in the ceiling of the chem lab. But don't be like Henry. Don't wait to the last minute and then cause an explosion or, because you waited to the last minute and now you panic because you can't find your artifacts. You should be able to remember where they are right now and get them in there. You can work on them later, but get them in there right now. Don't be like Henry. Don't come up to the last minute and then blow the place up. All right. So there's a 9. We did not write that. Yeah, that's right. So for skip task 4, the 9 competencies you didn't write about, you remember you wrote about 12 in the OMA. The other 9 you write about in skip task 4. Pretty simple, so that you've written them all this semester. And that will remind you where your artifacts are. So pretty easy. All right. So we're good to go. We're doing all of our housekeeping tonight. Let's talk about facilities right quick. When your data is bad, and I've told you this before, let me sign out this before it locks me out. When your data is bad, you get a state audit when you're on the persistently dangerous watch list. This is what they use right here. It's also good to use for your twice a month. Everybody knows in North and South Carolina, you're required to do a safety inspection of your facilities twice a month and document it. Now, if your district doesn't, or your school system, or your parish doesn't have this, you can use this one. But when the state comes out and audits your facility, they don't just look at your discipline instance. They look at everything. They look at your traffic control. They look at your surveillance, your signage, your access control. They look to see if doors are unoccupied rooms are locked, the doors aren't propped open, the chemicals are stored properly, all these kinds of things. They look at all of this stuff. Now, the only thing I had a couple questions about control points. One of the things that the state does not like to see that somebody that gets access to your building can get into the cafeteria without any hassle. In places where large amounts of kids can congregate, that they have unfettered access. Do you have a control point where you could stop somebody in your building before they got into the cafeteria or the auditorium or something? That's when we're talking about control points. But a couple of you have commented, the cars and buses get together, people in the car line, do kids get out and walk in there? Somebody said that they had safety patrol elementary kids doing crossing guards. That's a recipe for disaster. I would not put kids out in traffic with cars. That's just not smart. But these are the things that they're going to ask you about your building. Is trash piled up? Do you have hallways blocked? All those kinds of things. Designated control points with clear sight lines near the entrances and exits to cafeteria. That's what we're talking about. Do we have sight lines? Or could somebody slip in to those places like that where they could get unfettered access to large amounts of kids? Do you have control points? Do you have sight lines where you can see what's happening? That's a biggie when you have active shooters in your building, which is never good. So that's what facilities are. You are responsible to keep your facilities clean and safe. Now, the response that I always give back is, and for some reason, I don't understand how this came to be, but it's unfortunate, but it's just, it's true. For whatever reason, we think if we document issues on the twice monthly report, that's the end of our liability or responsibility. If you document them and then something happens and they didn't get fixed, you've written your own sentence. You've issued your own verdict when you go to court. You knew that was a problem. You knew that lock on that door was broken. You didn't bother to fix it. So documenting them without fixing them is as bad or worse than not documenting them at all. But for some reason, people think, well, hey, I documented, I'm out. No, you're not out. You're responsible. Say, well, I'm not I'd be over at the maintenance man's shed. I'd be at his house. I'd be somewhere. If I had something that I thought was a really bad legal liability issue, I'd be somewhere other than just I wrote on the report this month. And that goes back to that relationship with maintenance men. They're just like teachers. They're just like substitute teachers. You better know all your maintenance people. You better be feeding them. If this, whatever you can do to make them happy, to get them to come and to work in your building. One of the districts that I worked in along the way, they took the capital money for maintenance and they split it in half, and they gave half to the maintenance department and half to us as principals, so that we had money that we could pay for things and get people to come out and fix it. I mean, they're going to get all the money anyway. But boy, I tell you what, that made them a whole lot more responsive when they had, if you had half of their money and you would only give it to them if they came and worked. You talking about maintenance men coming on time and being there regularly and getting stuff fixed. That's the best system I've ever seen, by far. They only got half their budget for the year. They had to work for the other half. And now you talking about being efficient and coming on time and doing the things that they needed to do. I can't recommend that highly enough. And you could get stuff fixed. I hate to go back again. We had another school shooting since we've been together. We've had another one, but again, they went through a door. The classroom kids that got shot up in the one before last, the door lock was broken, had been for a long time. These weak points will come back to haunt you, folks. And even if you don't get convicted in court, you'll be able to live with yourself the rest of your life. I mean, so you got to make sure that you get out there and that these things get done and that you follow up to get them fixed. Whatever needs to happen is what you need to do. If you have to do it yourself, you need to get it done. I can't stress that enough. You've got to find a way, by hook or by crook. You got to get it done. That is your responsibility. Dr. Singh? You're still muted.
Sorry. It was hard for me to trust somebody to do those maintenance checks just because of the last thing that you said. I pretty much manage those as the principal, because it's something that just can't be checked. I mean, you truly had, and what happened with me is we had to check our gutters. Our assistant principal just looked and said, "Oh, the gutter's fine." Then a hurricane came through that weekend and it flooded the entire library because the gutter was actually clogged. So I learned my lesson then that I'm gonna be the one that does those checks. And then school safety came into to play or really came into play. So again, my word of advice is if you have somebody else doing them, make sure that you're checking up on that person, or just do them yourselves.
Yeah. I got lucky. Well, it wasn't lucky, but when I was in Burke County, I was principal of an elementary school. We were on the same campus as an old junior high school before all the new middle schools were built in Burke. They still had old junior highs, and we shared the cafeteria building. And so we weren't in the same building, but we were in the same geographical location on campus, and we had a building between that we shared. The junior high was a nightmare. It was old. It was run down. They were building a new middle school. They weren't spending any money, any time. It was just awful. And they had chemicals in an open storage room with all the old rags of Varsol, and the kid just threw a match in there and burned the whole building down. And my problem was my kindergartners were in that building, and that was attached to it in the lunchroom at the time. You ever tried to get kindergartners out of a lunchroom in the middle of a fire? It is literally herding cats. And so, but I learned right then, you can't ignore things. You can't depend on somebody else. It doesn't matter that at the end of the year that you're moving to a new facility or any of that. You got to keep your kids safe right now, today. That we're moving to a better facility next year doesn't matter. If the kids get killed this year, they'll never get to go to the new facility. And it was a miracle that we didn't have anything but minor injuries trying to get kids out. Was all we had, that we didn't all get burned up in that fire. That's exactly right. And so in that district, they had just come off of a junior high exploding and burning to the ground. Not a scrap left at Salem Junior High. It blew up. Because of lack of maintenance, and they smell gas. Nah, it's all right, going about your business. And the drink machine kicked on over the weekend, spark, and they found pieces of it miles away. There was nothing left. You didn't even know there'd been a building there. They had to have school the rest of that year till their new junior high was built, or new middle school, over at North Carolina School for the Deaf, there on the square in Morganton. Yeah. Just neglect, not paying attention, not caring. Somebody else's problem. We're going to a new facility one of these days, down the road. Doesn't matter about this, but we got kids in this building today. So we got to care today. And so this notion that we're under construction, that's not an excuse, folks. You still got to make sure your kids are safe. There's always going to be something going on. But that's got to be primal in facilities. As kids have and your faculty have to be safe. Last thing we want to talk about tonight is see, Christina said, and we have to put a fence up. Well, yeah, you would want to have a fence between the playground and a road. Yeah, that's exactly that it's new construction and that we're just getting started. But you know that won't be of any comfort to the parent whose kid ran out in the road and got run over. You know, we was going to get to that. We just hadn't got that done yet. You know, it's always, you know, thank you for that, Christina. Yeah, that's a good reminder. It's always, you know, we got 1,000 excuses, except that doesn't, you know, that doesn't bring that child back that gets hurt in this or gets killed. And you don't want that to happen on your watch, trust me. We've talked about finances some. I want to talk about school budgeting for just a minute. Mainly, I want to talk about fundraising. Fundraising is an evil. Some people think it's a necessary evil. It is not. It's just evil. But now here's my caveat, and I think I replied this back to Jackie today. If you do fundraisers, don't set out just to do a fundraiser in terms of I want to sell something to get money. Do an activity like a school dance or a carnival or something community spirit based or something like that you make money off of. Just knocking on somebody's door to sell them something again, that don't have kids out doing that. And the big thing is money. Now, we've talked about this before, and we're going to show these money. Who pays for teachers? Feds pay for which teachers? All right, so let's kind of count this down. Federal government pays for which teachers? CTE, yeah. Title I, EC 504. English as second language and academically gifted, right? So the feds are paying them. Who pays for just your regular ADM teachers, just your regular English math teachers? Who pays for them? That's that $8,000 a year that they send for the students, $800 at a time. Remember, they don't send the whole 800. They subtract your absentee rate. So if it's 5%, you get, you know, $760 rather than 800. Who pays for teachers? State does. All right. So here's the problem. Somebody else is paying for your teachers, but you want to take them off of what the federal or the state government is paying for them to do and raise money for you. Well, number one, for every dollar you raise, usually locally, you spend 1,000 in salary. That's a bad exchange. But number two, you're not paying them. And I don't like having them do fundraisers even after regular school hours, because then you get into if you got a ball game or something you're assigning them to, that's okay. But having them sell stuff after hours, you get into, you know, that's a whole nother legal issue that you don't want to get into. You know, you can assign people to work at ball games, you can assign people to work at carnivals, fairs, those kinds of things. That's an expectation. That's your supervision schedule. But just selling stuff, you know, then you get into work responsibilities, you get into lawsuits over compensatory time and all of those kinds of things. So it's best not to be in the selling business anyway. That's just a straight cash transaction. As you know, as Randy Moss would say, straight cash, homie. We don't want to be involved in those. We want to be involved in activities that can generate revenue. That way we don't get into work assignment issues, legal issues with the Department of Labor, with our teachers. We don't, you know, those kinds of things. You get these grievances filed with the Department of Labor over making you do fundraisers. Now there is no grievance over other assigned duties. If it's a ball game, a carnival, a car wash, something like that. But you can if you just have people out selling stuff. Now, for some reason, people think if we turn this over to our PTO, then we're good. Same rules apply to them as apply to you, and the same financial accountability applies to you. That money the activity must be approved. You have to account for the money the same way you do. Is if you got the money, it has to be receipted every day. There has to be a reconciliation. If it's a ball game, there has to be tickets. Everything has. And if somebody absconds with the money, they'll get you for failure to maintain fiscal control. And so let's look at that right quick. Let me share my screen. Again, this document is under tonight's lessons. I've got the budget laws. And so under duties and powers, the principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget. You have to do that. Your school improvement team, the owner of the school improvement plan, is supposed to be involved in that. Remember, you get your money in monthly installments. The district, it doesn't come all at one time. They subtract your absenteeism. You have to do daily deposits. You have to receipt. You have to do reconciliation with tickets, those kinds of things, all these things. And then your district will have a policy on fundraising. Everybody's does. And the one in CMS says you'll follow the same accounting procedures of the school system. It will all be the same. And you will handle receipts the same way you would if you were receiving money in school. And then it has some policies, be approved. And then the principal's boss has to approve those. You have to submit a request, and it has to be reflected in the budget, and you have to say what it's going to be spent on. And then, the appropriate person above that level says yay or nay. And then, and it even says the following fundraising activities are recommended to encourage community, club, class, or school to art festivals, carnivals, dances, car wash, barbecues, concerts, films, and student faculty games. Not selling stuff. Again, you get in trouble with the Department of Labor for selling stuff, and you're also hurting the businesses in your community. You're competing with them. So you're not supposed to use any instructional time for fundraising. I wouldn't, and I wouldn't do selling even after school hours. I would only have them working these kind of events as we talked about. And you don't use your CTE like mechanics, tailoring, cosmetology, or any of that to fundraising, because you're hurting your stakeholders in your community. Dr. Griffin Jordan last night was talking about, you ain't got to do what she was talking about was a cosmetology class was doing relaxer and extensions for $20. And she said the local shop charges what, 90 or 100 to do that? Well, they were putting the local shop out of business. These are your constituents, they're your stakeholders. When I became high school principal in Charlotte, we had a construction group, and I loved Wayne. Wayne Sigmund was as good a fellow as I've ever met in my life. But they were building those utility buildings, set them out in front of the school and selling them. Well, the people down the street that were doing that, they couldn't compete because they had free labor, and a lot of the materials had been donated. How do you compete with free? And so we had to discontinue that practice. We had, an English teacher teaching photography. That's a long story. Don't get me into that. But he was running photography lab, and he was doing work out of photography lab with students, and putting Live Touch and Strawbridge and them out of business. Local photography shops. You can't do stuff like that, folks. Fundraising is not a good thing, but some of it is better than others. Don't get into selling if you can help it of any kind. Have activities that generate revenue. Dr. Sain, I'm going to let you close this out tonight. All the things that I've talked about tonight are under tonight's session. I pulled up a lot of that stuff. There's a good one in there on school budgeting, but we've covered all the stuff on it. I don't like to sit and read PowerPoints to you. But everything that we talked about, is as usual, is under session 12. Dr. Sain, close us out tonight on fundraising.
Yeah, so just two big takeaways that you need to write down. If you fundraise, make sure you buy what you say you're going to buy when you fundraise. I have had principals that have posted, we're gonna make upgrades to this, and then actually they get the money and they decide, oh, we're not going to do that. Don't do that. It's going to get you in a lot of trouble. And two, just like Dr. Lamb said, don't try not to fundraise. It will be the bane of your existence. It will be there's really no good that comes out of fundraising, and especially if you have a district that or a county commission that just passed, let's just say a 1/4 cent tax raise to help fund schools. What message is that are you now sending to your parents? Oh, well, the county's gonna raise your taxes, but we're still gonna fundraise because, if that money's not getting to you, then that's a conversation you need to have with your district office, your county commission, planning on those, with planning on that side of it. But again, it's just, we've talked about all of the things that you have to do in this class, and you probably, when you leave these classes every Wednesday, you're like, oh my gosh, how do I keep up with this stuff? Well, don't add the burden of unnecessary fundraisers on that list of things that you have to do. That's kind of my message. Not Dr. Lamb says I'm usually positive. There's not a lot of positive things that I have to say about fundraising because it's awful.
Yeah, it's kind of like a wart on a hemorrhoid. It's kind of unnecessary. All right. That's all I know. I told some stuff I didn't. I want y'all to have a good break. Again, catch up on your evidences, catch up on your activities, begin to look at the CAP, spend a little time in your competency folio. We won't be back for 2 weeks. And now remember, when we come back, your case study will be due. So you got that. So you got kind of a week to work on your case study and to do some things for yourself there. Spend a little time with your family. Go to church. Some of you probably, y'all aren't like me. I know I could use a little churching up, so I'm going to go. And so I will see y'all in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good holiday. Thank you. TWC for Virginia. I think it's part of the, let me see, I'll pause the recording.